Hey travelers, Mag and I here on day 311 of our trip around the United States. Now we enter the final countdown, the last 3 states we need to complete our goal of finding geocaches in all the counties and pages in the lower 48 contiguous United States. Oregon, Washington, and Northern California, and then we are done. Oregon and Washington both do not allow micros to be used for the county qualifiers in the state. That means that while Aichan and I are making our way across the counties and the pages, we need to be cognizant that we cannot use any of those micros, aiming for only smalls or regulars to qualify within the counties. Just like when we dropped down out of the northern parts of Idaho to begin working our way south, we took on Washington and Oregon together. That's the same thing we're going to be doing as we come in along the eastern edge of the state in from Idaho. For today's route, we're going to be covering 350 miles. That's going to take us pretty well directly northwest through most of the biggest counties and pages in the state as we make our way from here in Rome up to Camden to bring our day to an end. For our second day, we're going to be covering 280 miles. Most of that day is going to actually be spent in Washington, but we will also have parts where we cross in and out of Oregon, as we'll be snaking our way west along the Columbia River, both in and out of Washington to grab the counties and pages in that part of Oregon, as well as along that little tiny strip of Washington right there. On the third morning, we've got about 180 miles to cover. We're going to be approaching that day a little bit differently than what the plan calls for. We'll be taking on the remaining pages and counties in the Washington portion of that route, but as soon as we drop back down into Oregon on that third day, we are going to beeline it into Portland. That's because Truax Outdoors is now living there with his family, and we had already planned all along to spend 3 days in Portland between an admin day and 2 days in the city. Knowing that he's there as well, there's a good chance we're going to tack on a couple of additional days to that as well and have a lot of adventures in that Portland area, including the part of that third day that we are going to be skipping so we can do it with Truax Outdoors instead. For now, it's just a matter of getting from here in the very southeast corner of the state up to Portland through the next 3 days. I foresee no problems with our route up ahead, and with luck, we'll be able to move through these targets, see some beautiful sights, and make it to our friend's house in good time. So let's see what the next 3 days across Oregon and Washington have in store for us. Come on, let's go. We begin our day trekking out of Idaho through Jordan Valley into Rome above the Owyhee River. This part of the state, at an elevation of nearly 3,400 feet, is a sparsely populated high desert. Within the canyon, many signs of Native American habitation have been found, including petroglyphs, water wheels, and rock shelters. The community of Rome draws its name from the geological structure that dominates the area. A 5-mile long, 2-mile wide, 100-foot tall rock formation that looks like ancient Roman ruins. Along this stretch, we stuck pretty darn close to the highway, only stopping off to find geocaches that were at least listed as larger than a micro. Having had several days of rest in Emmett, Aichan was more than happy to get out and join me on each of the hunts. Always great to have her help making a find. To reach DeLorme page 86, we need to take a branch off of our main route heading southwest into the Steens Mountain Wilderness. These 170,000 acres, under the care of the Bureau of Land Management, are considered some of the wildest and most remote locations left in the state. Just a little north of the Alvord Desert, we reach our destination at the Mann Lake Recreation Site. The lake, which rests at the bottom of a 1-mile-tall vertical escarpment, holds water all year long. Many fishermen come to its shallow waters in search of the Lahontan cutthroat trout, which have adapted to its alkaline waters. We come to traverse the lands around the shores of the lake in search of a different prize, though. A prize that, by now, you have become well familiarized with. Originally, I had only intended to stop for 1, maybe 2 finds and then move on, but seeing the series around the lake, I couldn't help but stop for several more. Seeing the first real signs of civilization all day long, we come into the city of Hines with a population of about 1,500 people. The city was first named for Fred Herrick, a railroad promoter and sawmill operator who had founded a lumber company here. It was renamed to Hines in 1931, following the acquisition of the railroad and lumber company by Edward Hines from Herrick. Immediately north of Hines, with no break between the two, you'll find the city of Burns, the county seat of Harney County with a population of about 2,700 people. With these two cities added together, more than half the population of this very sparsely populated county can be found right here. Knowing that we were heading right back into some of the loneliest parts of the state as soon as we left the city, we weren't exactly in a hurry to leave. We took our time checking out the local sites and grabbed a bite to eat before hitting the road again. North of the city, we steadily begin to ascend into the Blue Mountains range, with the Strawberry Mountains off to our east and the Aldridge Mountains off to our west. In practically no time at all, we find ourselves arriving into Canyon City, the county seat of Grant County with a population of about 700 people. Much like Hines and Burns, Canyon City butts right up against John Day just to the north, with a population of about 1,600 people. Still winding our way along the mountain roads, we now turn west, following the course of the John Day River. This 284-mile-long tributary of the Columbia River runs undammed for its entire length. This unaltered state makes it the fourth longest free-flowing river in the contiguous U.S. Dropping down to a very reasonable 2,300 feet, we catch our breath for a moment in the small city of Dayville, with a population of about 150 people. Unsurprisingly, this small town, incorporated in 1913, is named for its spot along the John Day River. This certainly seems like as good a time as any to stop off and make a couple more finds as we make our way across the rugged terrain. It's always nice to have a geocache to stop off and find, as this helps to take long stretch of miles and break them into very manageable sections. I was on my own for each of these finds though, as it was far too early in the day to even consider waking Ai-chan up from her late afternoon nap. Our first day comes to a close, traversing the John Day Fossil Beds National Monument. In no other region in the world than here in the John Day Basin can you find a more complete sequence of tertiary land populations. This 14,000-acre national monument, spanning across both Wheeler and Grant counties, has a fossil record that dates back in layers nearly 50 million years. From the hot, wet, semi-tropical Clarno nut beds about 44 million years ago to the more modern ecosystem about 5 million years ago, these fossil beds tell a story through time. The next morning, we rise with the sun and quickly make our way across the Columbia River into Washington, beginning at Maryhill State Park. Across its 81 acres, you can find 4,700 feet of shoreline, offering camping, hiking, boating, fishing, and swimming opportunities. The park takes its name from Sam Hill, who had built a castle on top of the hill and named it after his daughter Mary. Before its construction was even complete though, it was decided that this family home would become an art museum. Looking up into the hills, it was not a castle that dominated our line of sight though, but the Maryhill Stonehenge Memorial. Like the museum just 3 miles to the east, this impressive structure was also constructed by Sam Hill. This memorial resides at the original town site of Maryhill. This full-scale replica of the famous Neolithic structure situated high on Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire County, England, was dedicated on July 4th of 1918 as a memorial to the people who had perished in World War I. When the surrounding town of Maryhill burned to the ground, only the replica of Stonehenge remained standing. Sam Hill lived just long enough to see his monument rededicated on May 30th of 1929. Our quest to complete the pages along the southern edge of Washington has us following the course of the Columbia River. Beginning its journey in the Rocky Mountains of British Columbia, it first flows northwest and then south through Washington before turning west to form the border between Washington and Oregon. Whenever we would have to push away from the river, on either side, we would immediately begin rising right back into the hills again. With a quick hop back into the farmlands along the northern shores of Oregon, we find ourselves facing off against a geocache hidden within a thresher. As with a train or a tank, I likely would have walked away if this is listed as a micro, but since we're pursuing things bigger than micros for the county challenge, I was assured that this would at least be something with a little bit of girth, and I was not disappointed. Hopping back across the Columbia into Washington yet again, we visit the Columbia Hills Historical State Park. This 3,300-acre state park, formed by an impounding of the Columbia River, was created in 2003 between the merger of Horse Thief Lake State Park and Dalles Mountain Ranch. Many of the stones featured in this park are of historical significance to the Native American tribes who reside in the region. The petroglyphs on the stones featured here were saved from being inundated by the Columbia River. When the Dalles Lock and Dam was completed on March 10th of 1957 by the Army Corps of Engineers, it submerged the oldest continuously inhabited Native American settlement in North America. At the request of those tribes, these stones were brought out of storage for display to the public. For our final drop back into Oregon for the day, we come into the Dalles, the largest city in Wasco County with a population of about 16,000 people. This area, well, what of it is still above water anyway, has been known to be a trading center for Native Americans dating back as far as 10,000 years ago. This ancestry and heritage makes this area one of the most significant archaeological regions in the Pacific Northwest. As we love to do, we experience the city's history through the many vibrant murals painted across the walls of the buildings. Each mural told its own story for us to interpret, like when Lewis and Clark camped near Mill Creek on October 25th through the 27th of 1805. The name of the city derives its meaning from the French word Dalles. The French-Canadian employees of the Northwest Company, who regularly traversed the waters of the river, used the word to refer to the columned basalt rocks carved by the river. The name stuck, and the city continued to grow over time, as it was the ending place of the overland portion of the Oregon Trail. We caught a quick train out of the city and followed the Columbia River west toward our next destination. As we had been doing all day long, we stopped to appreciate the view out over the river whenever an opportunity presented itself. The sun had already begun its daily dip over the western horizon by the time we made our way into Hood River, the county seat of Hood River County with a population of about 8,300 people. We decided to make the most of the remaining daylight and pursued a few geocaches along the waterfront. And since it was now late enough into the day, Aichan was willing to wake up and help me in the hunt, as she could. The problem is, with her afternoon naps stretching long into the day now, I have grown quite experienced at being able to find geocaches by myself. I made the quick finds one after another while she was still using her paws to rub the sleep from her eyes. Eventually though, we reached the end of our remaining time, and after adding our name to one more log, had to bolt across the river. Our third morning saw us waking up in Trout Lake in the northwest corner of Klickitat County. We found ourselves climbing through the forested hills near the base of Mount Adams to make finds in DeLorme pages 89 and 88. I had suspected all along that making finds in either of these pages would be quite the endeavor, and they did not disappoint on that front. Aichan was more than willing to help me sniff both of these hides out of their hiding places so we could climb back down from the mountains as quickly as possible. With her nose leading the way, it felt like practically no time at all before we made our descent back down from the mountains to the Columbia River. At this point, my head was hardly even in the game anymore. All of my thoughts focused on getting back to Portland as quickly as possible so we could link up with Truax Outdoors. It seemed like Aichan could sense this, and with her also wanting to make it to Portland as quickly as possible, she was helping with each find along the way. Before we knew it, we were tracking down the last find that we needed to count all the pages along the southern end of Washington as complete. Such a welcome sight to see the Bridge of the Gods, spanning 1,127 feet across a thin channel of the Columbia River. Once our tires had hit pavement on the Oregon side of the waters, we immediately beat feet as quickly as we could to link up with Truax Outdoors and make our way into the Molalla Recreation Area. Together, we took a quick hike up to a small waterfall before ending things at a geological feature he refers to as the eye-bending wall. All right, that is it. We have made it to our destination. I am so excited because we're going to be spending the next several days with Truax Outdoors, and we have some pretty big plans coming your way.
That's a fact.
When we left Idaho, we started in the very southeast corner of Oregon and worked our way in a very northwest line across the state, mostly the entire eastern half and all of those really, really big pages that cover the state. Once we finish with Truax Outdoors, we're going to be going up into Washington and finishing that state before we finish the rest of Oregon. But what we have left over for Oregon is all of the much smaller pages on the western side of the state, where we're going to be seeing a lot more people, a lot more civilization, and actual just stuff. Because while we were doing the eastern side of Oregon, it was beautiful. There's
not much there.
Not much there. On our second day, and this morning as well, we were crisscrossing the Columbia River back and forth between Oregon and Washington, covering the counties and pages along the south edge of Washington and along the north edge of Oregon. That entire strip has offered us beautiful views coming all the way out to where we are now in Portland. And again, these views are only going to get better from here. I hope you guys have enjoyed this trip up through Oregon and over through Washington to get to where we are now, and I'm very excited about what's coming ahead. Thank you guys for joining us. Like this video, subscribe, stay tuned for updates, and we'll see you out on the trails.